It was a quiet afternoon in a small, cozy cafe tucked away on a busy street corner. The kind of place where regulars come to enjoy their coffee and the staff know your name. Among the few customers that day sat a man who, despite his fame, carried himself like anyone else. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, sat at a corner table, sipping his coffee in peace. There was no entourage, no flashy behavior, just a man enjoying a quiet moment. His calm demeanor made him blend in, but his presence still carried an unspoken charm that caught the attention of a few people. As Keanu gazed out the window, perhaps lost in thought, the door opened and a young boy walked in. His clothes were worn, and his face showed the marks of a tough life. He lingered near the counter, unsure of where to go, his eyes scanning the room nervously. No one paid him much attention, except for Keanu, who noticed him immediately. Little did anyone in that cafe know, this brief moment of connection was about to set off a chain of events no one could have predicted. What the boy was about to say would leave everyone speechless, and what followed would be something they'd never forget. The cafe was small and welcoming, the kind of place where people came to escape the rush of the outside world. The air smelled of freshly brewed coffee, and soft music played in the background. Locals sat at scattered tables, chatting quietly or working on their laptops. The sunlight streamed through the large front window, giving the room a warm glow. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. It felt like home for those who visited. In one corner, near the window, sat Keanu Reeves. He was dressed simply in a black jacket and jeans, looking like any other customer. With a cup of coffee in his hand and his gaze fixed on the world outside, he seemed lost in his own thoughts. He didn't seek attention or stand out in any way, yet there was something about his calm presence that made a few people glance his way now and then. Near the entrance, a young boy lingered. His clothes were worn and frayed, and his sneakers looked like they'd walked countless miles. He was thin, his face pale, but his eyes told a different story. They were sharp, full of a kind of understanding you don't often see in someone so young. He seemed hesitant, like he didn't quite belong in the cafe, but couldn't bring himself to leave. Every so often, he glanced around, carefully observing the people and the space. He didn't approach anyone, but it was clear he had a purpose for being there, even if he hadn't yet acted on it. The contrast between him and the warmth of the cafe was striking, and it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. Keanu sat back in his chair, staring into his coffee. The boy's warning echoed in his mind, leaving him uneasy but not alarmed enough to leave. There was something in the boy's voice, a mix of fear and urgency, but also something else, sincerity. Keanu decided to stay, not out of recklessness, but because he felt there was more to understand. His curiosity was paired with a quiet compassion he couldn't ignore. He glanced toward the boy, who was now standing near the cafe entrance, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Keanu waved him over. At first, the boy hesitated, looking around as if to make sure this wasn't a trick. When Keanu motioned again, his gesture calm and inviting, the boy slowly walked over. Keanu pulled out the chair across from him and gestured for him to sit. "Hungry?" Keanu asked, his tone gentle but straightforward. The boy nodded reluctantly. Keanu flagged down the server and ordered a sandwich and a hot drink, making sure the boy got to choose what he wanted. When the food arrived, the boy ate carefully, like he wasn't sure when his next meal might come. They sat in silence for a few moments before Keanu asked, "What's your name?" "Liam," the boy replied, his voice quiet but steady. He didn't give much else, but Keanu didn't press too hard. Instead, he asked small, simple questions, where Liam was from, how long he'd been in town. Slowly, the boy opened up, sharing bits of his story. Life had been tough, full of nights on the street and days searching for safe places to rest. Keanu listened with genuine concern, never interrupting. His questions were thoughtful, showing that he cared more about understanding Liam's struggles than fixing them in that moment. It was clear this wasn't just a conversation. It was a connection being built. The atmosphere in the cafe shifted the moment the door opened. Two men entered, their eyes scanning the room with a certain coldness. Their presence instantly felt out of place in the cozy setting. Keanu's instincts kicked in, and he subtly shifted his position, becoming more aware of his surroundings. His attention was drawn to the men, who looked around with a careful, almost calculated gaze. One of them walked up to the counter while the other moved further into the cafe, eyeing the patrons, including Keanu and Liam. Keanu stayed calm, not letting his tension show. He glanced at Liam, who had gone still, his eyes locked on the men. Keanu leaned closer and spoke softly. "Stay calm. Stay seated." He gave a slight nod, signaling the boy to remain where he was, knowing instinctively that the situation was getting dangerous. The man at the counter handed over some cash for a drink, but Keanu could see the tension in his movements. He wasn't just paying for coffee, he was stalling. Meanwhile, the second man had moved closer to Keanu and Liam's table, his eyes narrowing when he saw them sitting together. Keanu kept his posture relaxed but alert, his gaze fixed on the man. Liam's eyes darted nervously from one man to the other, but Keanu kept his voice steady, whispering, "Just breathe, everything's fine." It wasn't long before the tension broke. The man at the counter suddenly pulled out a gun, aiming it toward the cashier. The other man made his move at the same time, positioning himself near the door, clearly trying to block anyone from escaping. It was an attempted robbery, but what they hadn't anticipated was Keanu's response. Keanu didn't flinch. He stood up slowly, his body language calm but confident. The men seemed taken aback by his presence, especially the one near the door. Keanu took a deep breath, then in a steady voice said, "You don't need to do this. No one's going to stop you if you want to walk out the door." The calmness in his tone and the fact that he wasn't reacting out of fear seemed to confuse the robbers. The man with the gun hesitated for a moment, his grip tightening on the weapon. Keanu kept his eyes locked on him, showing no signs of panic. The silence hung heavy in the air, but it wasn't long before the first man spoke, lowering the gun slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. Keanu remained composed, his voice soft but firm. "I know this isn't the way you want to go. Just walk out and no one gets hurt." The man looked at his partner, who was now shifting uncomfortably, then at Keanu, clearly unsure of what to do next. Liam, watching everything unfold, couldn't believe it. His instincts had been right. The danger had come, but Keanu's calm presence had made all the difference. What happened next left everyone in the cafe in stunned silence as the two men slowly backed out of the cafe, leaving their plan behind. The tension in the room melted away as people began to realize they had just witnessed something extraordinary. As soon as the robbers left, the cafe slowly started to settle back into normalcy. But the quiet didn't last long. Within minutes, the sound of sirens grew louder, and a few police cars pulled up outside. The cafe staff had made a silent call to the authorities during the incident, and now the officers moved quickly to secure the scene. The two men, still rattled from the confrontation, were quickly arrested. It was clear that they hadn't expected anyone to challenge them, especially not in such a calm, collected way. The police took them outside, and the tension in the room finally started to ease. The patrons, still in shock, began to whisper among themselves, unsure of what had just happened, but fully aware that things could have gone much worse if not for Keanu's intervention. Liam, who had been quiet throughout, found himself suddenly the center of attention. Several people turned to him with wide eyes, praising him for his sharp instincts. "You were the first to notice them," one woman said. "You saw what was happening before anyone else." Another person nodded, adding, "You saved all of us just by being aware." Keanu, who had stayed in the background during the police's arrival, approached Liam with a grateful smile. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and spoke sincerely. "You did well. Your instincts kept us all safe today. I can't thank you enough for that." Liam looked up at Keanu, a little overwhelmed by the praise, but there was a quiet pride in his eyes. For the first time, someone saw him not just as a homeless kid, but as someone with real value and a voice worth listening to. The police soon wrapped up their investigation, and as they left, the cafe patrons were still talking about what had just happened. For Liam, the day would be remembered for more than just the chaos. It would be remembered as the day he was recognized for the strength he had carried with him for so long. After the police left, the cafe was quieter, but the weight of what had happened still hung in the air. Keanu sat at his table for a while, lost in thought. His gaze often drifted to Liam, who was standing by the counter, looking like he didn't know what to do next. Keanu watched him for a moment before standing up and walking over. "Hey," Keanu said, his voice gentle but sincere. "You're a smart kid, and you've got a good head on your shoulders. But you shouldn't have to live like this. You've got potential, and I want to help." Liam looked up, surprised by the kindness in Keanu's words. He had heard promises before, but they were never followed through. He didn't know how to react. He wasn't used to people caring enough to actually offer help. Keanu continued, "I can offer you some financial help, a place to stay if you need it, or even put you in touch with some people who can help you get back on your feet. You deserve a chance at something better." Liam hesitated, his mind racing. It was hard for him to believe someone like Keanu was offering him real help. He had grown used to people ignoring him or looking past him, but Keanu's sincerity was different. His eyes filled with tears as he quietly said, "I don't know what to say." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, giving him a reassuring smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here to help if you want it. And whatever you decide to do, I'll be supporting you. You have a future, Liam. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With that, Liam finally nodded, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in a long time, he felt like someone truly cared. As Keanu and Liam parted ways, the cafe buzzed with quiet conversation, but the weight of the moment lingered in the air. What had started as an ordinary day had transformed into something extraordinary. The encounter between the homeless boy and a well-known actor had reminded everyone in that room of the power of compassion, courage, and the small acts of kindness that can change lives. The boy had warned of danger, not because he was expecting trouble, but because he had learned to trust his instincts. Keanu's decision to listen and offer help was an act that spoke volumes about the importance of showing empathy to others, especially when it seems like no one is watching. This simple encounter ended up inspiring many people who heard the story. It showed that sometimes, those we least expect can become our greatest heroes, whether it's a boy on the streets or a man who chooses kindness over indifference. The story of that day stayed with everyone, a reminder of the power of doing the right thing.